Choo choo everynyannn! Today I finally have an excuse to make a steampunk fit, and I am extremely excited about this. You know, the inner teenager has been fed very well for the past few years. So a little intro into steampunk. It is basically a fantasy genre where technology is running on steam. Outfits are Victorian inspired and there are pocket watches everywhere. And I love it. I love everything about this, except the majority of color spectrum is brown, which I don't wear. I also saw this steampunk R2-D2 when I was at Luna, and it looked so freaking cool, and it was blowing like so bubbles. It's so adorable. Back in the day, when I was first introduced to steampunk, I was broke as fuck. And this was really not very accessible. There was like no overlap with this style and my regular style. And I wasn't even able to have the regular style that I wanted. So there was really no way to justify getting into steampunk, unfortunately. So I just never did it. So now I'm still broke, but what I do have is more smarts, more skills, and more anxiety. The last one probably won't help with this, but no, I just thought I might share anyways. And now, as is the new tradition, basically with all my videos, we're starting with a corset top. Starting strong with this curtain. I got at the second-hand store for €3. I love this pattern, it's so pretty, but you know, it is brown, which as I mentioned, not my personal favorite, but perfect for this steampunk look. I cut the pattern for the corset top that I made myself, and I cut it out of 3 different fabrics. One is the brown curtain, for the outside, and there is also a thick fabric for the middle that will provide more structure, as well as a lining. So the thicker fabric and the lining, I just got that from my giant hoard of fabrics that I have at home. I live in a landfill. I sewed all the pattern pieces together, so now I have like 3 of these corsets. I also glued the interfacing on the back to help the eyelets. Then I sewed together the front and middle fabric. I also finished the straps. I sandwiched together 2 front fabrics and 1 thicker fabric for the middle, as well as interfacing. Then I turned it around, ironed it down, and top stitched it. I sewed tunnels for the boning and also attached the straps. I also sewed the ruffle. I just cut part of the curtain that was already hemmed, so I didn't have to hem it. Then I sewed the lining on there and I left the bottom open. After that, I shoved the boning in and top stitched the top. I then pinned the ruffle on the bottom of the corset, sewed that down, then I sewed the front and lining together to close the hole. All that's left was to make eyelets as well as stitching on some gears I got from AliExpress. So the corset is now done. And with that, also the good part of this video. So please subscribe before this goes to shit. And also leave a comment. It really helps the video out, and we have to, compensate because of the lack of quality. So since I am planning to make a more simple outfit, I still wanted to, spice up the whole look a little bit. So I made a prosthetic hand and leg that are, steamed powered instead of, AI. And, we made the union pay for it. Starting with making a glove. I took some leftover jersey and traced my hand and sewed it together. Once we have a glove that fits me well, I just basically started cutting shapes out of teeny wave foam and gluing it on the glove while wearing it. That's it, that's the tutorial. Thanks for watching, bye! Yeah, that's it. I was just gluing and cutting, also shaping with a heat gun. After some trial and error, this is the process so far. I made some oopsie daisies with gluing, so we have some glue spots, but it's fine. this will have like a messy vibe, so we're just gonna slap some paint on it and call it a day. But the mobility and comfort is pretty good, so I just kept on cutting and gluing. So I painted over the glue, and I think you will barely be able to tell when other shit will be painted. And I'm also gluing more bits on the part of the knuckles to also, distract from the glue a little bit. So this is it for the base. So now we just have to make more details to make it more interesting. And so I have like a hoard of buttons at home for some fucking reason. And I gathered some of, the ones that have loop on the back, and I snagged it off and I sanded the back to be more flat. And then I just glued that on everywhere. I did take a bunch of different buttons, so it gave a bunch of different shapes, but I wanted more variety. So I also got googly eyes, some rhinestones I had lying at home, and I also cut out some small circles from EVA foam. I also glued on some random pieces of foam I had left over, and I dremeled some weathering to the arm. And with that, the Thanos glove from Temu is ready for painting. I started with black base, and then I was adding on metallic paint. I only had gold and silver, so I had to, mix them together to get the shades that I needed. Then I put the black wash over all of this a few times, as well as making some shading. I am so pleased with this result. I have not made a lot of props like this, so I chose like a rougher look that I was pretty sure I was able to pull off and hide the mistakes that were inevitable. Now that we have a hand, we also need the leg.
Theft of one used, twisted, hairy right leg.
I started with what shoes I was gonna wear, and I used masking tape and foil version to make the pattern. I usually don't like this technique. I much prefer to draft the clothing patterns. But when we're doing stuff like this that goes over the shoe and whatnot, this is actually just much easier to do. Okay, so we're also gonna excuse a lack of footage for a bunch of process over here. While making the leg part. I really do not like feet. And I don't want to look at this while I edit. Also, I am not putting my feet online for free. Also, I wasn't willing to shave my legs. So here we are. So I drew on the masking tape the shape of pattern pieces, and then I cut them off my leg. Then I cut it out of jersey fabric I had at my stash. After that was cut, I sewed it all together. And I was basically trying it on and fixing it until I was happy with the fit. I then extended the length to the knee. Well, that was idea, but I didn't measure it, so it didn't quite reach. Zipper is also put on the back of this. The bottom of the shoe is very flimsy, so I glued a piece of thin EVA foam on the inside so that it will hold shape. Then I reused the tape mask pattern and took out the pattern for front of the shoe, since we have this round cup shape. Having some pattern is really helpful while making this. I cut it out of EVA foam and shaped it with heat and glued it on the top part of the shoe. And I also, already glued on some random S shapes. And I just kept on going, basically cutting up EVA foam and gluing on directly on my leg. There was glue everywhere on the leg, by the way. I also fixed the seam on the toe protection with clay foam. I was then making more details, as well as a knee cover. Now that we'll see that at the end. But you know what? It's in a bunch of footage, and I'm just not gonna be cutting it out. I fixed the seam and glued googly eyes and other shit on. I did make 2 pieces so they would move, but I have never made armor before, so I was trying out how to attach this together, and it was not going that great. So just as the arm, I was also gluing the googly eyes and buttons and random crap everywhere. I also took my Dremel and distressed the whole thing. Then I primed it and painted the whole thing black. Now that took like 3 layers to stick. I also primed and painted the kneecap, as well as making some pieces of camera to cover the zipper with them. When all was primed, I started with painting the metallic paint, and oh no, it's spilling everywhere. Such a fun and relaxing hobby to have. Then I just splashed different shades of paint on, just like the arm. Then we have all the metallics on, it's time to splash black wash on and do some shading, just like the arm. Only the shape of this made it incredibly more frustrating to paint. I put on some shine with white paint and it was a little too aggressive, so I went over with the metallic paint without the wash to make a nicer shine effect. Then I attached the pieces to cover the zipper. So here is how I made this. I took some measurements, took measurements, and I took the straps of how do you call this? Velcro? Yeah, I think so. I know we call them little hedgehogs in Slovenian, so I'm just gonna call it that because it's so much cuter. So yeah, I measured and cut it out of. I had a strap, so I cut out my measurements and I glued it together with contact glue. I also made some jewelry, and we also won't see most of this at the end. But it's very cute. And with that, I'm done, yay! I'm very pleased with how these prosthetics turned out. As I said, the union made the factory pay for it, so we got the most mid-quality possible. For the styling, I got a dress and a skirt second hand, and I also had these goggles for 15 years. I think they're so old that the reason they're not on my head is because the elastic disintegrated from age. I just would not keep it on my head, and I didn't have time before the event to change it, so yeah, no fun. I did, however, change the elastic for the photo shooting we had later. Okay, but you might be like, wait, where did the kneecap cover go? What happened there? Well, how unfortunately of you to ask. So basically, as I said, I don't really know shit about making armor, which is partially a reason I did these prosthetics, so I could have a little trial because I am planning to do a more complex armor for a cosplay, right? And especially the part that I wanted to, try to figure out is the moving part. So for knees and stuff. So and unfortunately I was not able to figure that out at the end, so now I have a lot more work with my much more complex cosplay. So I had to cut out half an hour of whining. So yeah, we're just gonna move on to the photo shooting actually. My boyfriend promised me an old steam locomotive that I could take pictures on in a city near him, and they put it in prison. That was depressing, but we found a second location, which was just a random alley behind some sort of factory, which I'm not sure was operational, honestly. All of them look like a set from The Walking Dead or something. So me and my photographer did our best with what we had. We have quite a few steam locomotives in my country on display like this. And some are even functional. You can see them go, I think, once or twice a year. I mean, honestly, with how slow our local trains are, I would assume they all run on steam. But that's not the point, however. The point was we were here and we had to shoot something because I made this costume in December and the photo shoot kept getting pushed back. And I just wanted a footage to finish this video. Also, this is a winter costume and I'm in 5 layers in the middle of heatwave. I wanted a nice shot of me walking down the stairs and my boyfriend filmed my 13 chins instead. Absolute cinema. I love how these pictures turn out even with all the difficulties. I was channeling a memory of waiting for a train that was delayed for 45 minutes, which is why they feel so authentic. The suitcase I also upcycled a while ago, and it was something I had at home for like 10 years. Here is a video of that. There is also a crash out cut in 4K on it actually. Then we moved to another location, which was just a bus stop, like a functioning, I guess, bus stop. And again, no, I'm gonna need to bring up the set of The Walking Dead because it looked rough. Anyways, this is gonna be it for this video. This project contained a lot of fun and laughter, but also tears and betrayal. I also didn't film the outro because I was like crashing out a little bit. So, yeah. Like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.